Hi, and welcome from the Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance. We are so excited to be joining you today. My name is Ariella Mordkowitz. I live in Washington, D.C., where my work has been focused on enhancing the female Jewish spiritual and communal experience, which is why I was so excited when JOFA offered me the opportunity to interview the energetic and passionate visionary behind At the Well, Sarah Waxman. Today, we are going to have a chance to talk to Sarah and learn a little bit more about the work that At the Well does, and use this as an opportunity to focus on Rosh Chodesh Elul, this month of crazy pre-high holiday intensity and intention, which actually begins this Shabbat. So before I introduce Sarah, a little bit of housekeeping, some practical information for the webinar. If you're participating through Zoom or Facebook, you are welcome to ask all of your questions for Sarah at any time through the chat feature. We're going to get to all kinds of good stuff, but if you have any questions that come up about At the Well, about well circles, female bodies and Judaism, wellness rituals, Rosh Chodesh, anything you can think of, we'll do our best to have Sarah address the questions as they come up. You're also welcome to email your questions to rivka@jofa.org. That's RIVKA@JOFA.org. And without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Sarah Waxman. She is the founder and chief instigator of At the Well. She is a yoga and mindfulness entrepreneur. Harvard Divinity School deemed her a secular millennial spiritual leader. I kind of really, really love that, especially given today's conversation about women's titles. That might go up there as one of my faves. She also happens to be a national lacrosse champion who, in her spare time, created a global network of Jewish women connecting through spirituality and the marking of time. Sarah, welcome to JOFA, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. This is awesome. Also, this is my first webinar with anybody, really. So I'm happy to be with you all. And
Awesome.
yeah, I think I just want to start by saying that I'm excited and honored that JOFA invited me to do this. I know that we've talked about it a little bit, but I don't identify myself as an Orthodox person or woman, and the invitation to come be part of that community under the umbrella of Judaism and our love for connecting with each other is just really important to me and a total honor. And I just wanted to shout that out as we start, and to double encourage people to ask me questions. I see that there's like a dozen people or so following along live, and we're really here to serve as much as possible.
Amazing. So just let's kick off. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to start At the Well?
Yes, although it's not a short story, so I'm going to try to give the elevator pitch, which is that the real true inspiration comes from my own lived experience. I'm also from Washington, D.C., and was raised in a classic conservative American Jewish home. I kept kosher and had Friday night dinner, of course, and the holidays, but I went to a secular school. And yeah, just said, oh, speak up. Okay, I'm going to speak up. So I have a love of Judaism throughout my whole life. In my mid-20s, I was feeling, I think we'll get into this more, but I talk more now, a lot of disconnection in my life, a disconnection from my body and what it meant to be embodied, and definitely disconnected from spiritual practices that had origins within Judaism. I have a background in teaching mindfulness and yoga, and I was raised in other types of spiritual traditions as well. And I had a lot of accessible channels to use secular versions of Eastern traditions in my life and to cultivate spirituality. And I was missing a Jewish connection. And there was a couple things that happened right away, like within a 4-month span. I learned about Rosh Chodesh as a ritual for women. I learned about understanding the Hebrew calendar as a spiritual journey and thinking about how I could use that as a reference point for me. I had a really influential mikvah experience. And for the first time ever, I learned about tracking my menstrual cycle within my Rosh Chodesh group. And those 4 things really, really impacted me and made me think about my Jewish practice and Judaism in a little bit of a different way that was more of a wellness bent. And in all honesty, I got really obsessed with the ritual of Rosh Chodesh, and I devoured everything that I could. And I felt like it was time to update resources on this ritual. And I'm a crazy person who just decided to get going on it. And now we're almost 3 years in. And that's the shortest version of the story I can say, but it's really about my lived experience and what I was experiencing as a millennial woman in America.
I so love the way you describe coming on your own personal journey. And I think that that really turns your passion project into something that is fueled by something that you personally needed and found that you had a community that felt similarly. When you talked just now briefly, and we'll go back to it because I really think it resonates hopefully with a lot of the participants in the JOFA community, that idea of being disconnected. I want to come back to that and talk about feeling that disconnection, because I think that that does resonate with a lot of Orthodox women today for a variety of reasons. But can you give us like just a short elevator pitch about what At the Well does today, the services it provides to the community and to women in particular, and what the At the Well community looks like, so that we can get a little bit of an intro?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely created this out of pure selfishness, that I wanted to live in a society where tons of my peers were talking about the same things that I was interested in, which is sort of the intersection of health and neuroscience of my body and understanding my body, and spiritual practices specifically within Jewish wisdom and Jewish spirituality. So I was having a hard time accessing that, unlike some other spiritual practices like, yoga, meditation, or, traditional Vipassana meditation, for example. So At the Well is a women's health and wellness organization that's specifically rooted in Jewish wisdom. We are on a mission to unify practices of health and holiness and bring them together. So what am I doing for my overall health? When I'm talking about that, I mean my physical body and my mental health. And then what am I doing for my spiritual life? And I think that field is growing pretty rapidly within America and within the world, about thinking about how our spirituality is actually linked to some of our health, and our health can be linked back and forth. Mm-hmm. And At the Well is just, our lane. We are specifically intersecting women's health and Jewish wisdom.
And how does that involve, loop it back to the way you so passionately talk about Rosh Chodesh, because I think many of us are familiar with Rosh Chodesh groups and coming together as women, but speak more about how you use Rosh Chodesh and what At the Well brings to this concept of a Rosh Chodesh group.
Yeah, so one of the main things that we do is inspire and encourage the ritual of Rosh Chodesh to be practiced across the diversity of the Jewish people across the world. And the way that we promote celebrating Rosh Chodesh is really borrowed and standing on the shoulders of some of traditional feminists in the 60s and 70s that discovered Rosh Chodesh as a women's holiday, again, after sort of really learning, sifting through Talmud, finding lines of text from the medieval ages about really elevating Rosh Chodesh as a women's day. And they made it an opportunity for once a month for communities of women to come together to storytell and see and be heard with each other using the Hebrew calendar and themes of that Hebrew month. And I learned about this ritual later in my 20s. I had never heard of Rosh Chodesh before. I had never really understood the connection that the Jewish people have with the moon, and that what that offers me as a woman. And when I did learn about it, it immediately kind of blew my mind. And I formed a group with some friends when I was living in DC, and it quickly became one of the coolest things that I was doing in my life. And so one of the main pillars of At the Well is to coach and inspire communities to form around this ritual of monthly gatherings, mm-hmm. and then to form a network of those communities. And I just want to define those two words, communities and networks, because they're buzzwords. We use them a lot, and it's part of my job to really teach what those are. Communities are groups of people with a shared mission and a shared sense of belonging. So everyone that's participating in their Rosh Chodesh circle, At the Well, we call them well circles. Everyone that's participating in their well circle is a leader and a follower is taking a turn to host in their home, they really have a responsibility for the group and its collectiveness, and that makes us feel like we belong. And networks are groups of communities and individuals that have the same values. And that's why we really say that we're building a network of these well circles around the world, because, I hope after this webinar, a dozen well circles pop up in the Orthodox American community. And we also have over 100 circles all over the world. And likely those communities, those well circles, are in different, really diverse corners of our people. But if we have the same values that are happening throughout this ritual, then it's a really powerful way of convening individuals. So that's one of the main things that I spend my time doing, and At the Well does, and we coach each other, is to really equip Jewish women around the world with the resources and the knowledge and the support to create these types of monthly gatherings for themselves.
I think that's so beautiful, and I really appreciate the differentiation between community and network, because I think that as Jewish women, we can find ourselves more connected as Jewish women in the individual communities that we find ourselves living in, and the ability to come together and kind of cross over those communities to feel connected on a more global level. It's something really profound and beautiful. And when you were talking before, again, about that disconnection, how you were personally feeling disconnected from your body, from the Jewish community, from any sort of community at that, juncture in your life, and from spirituality and from your tradition, that's something that I do think resonates with a lot of Orthodox women. There may be women who live a life that is very committed in terms of, and robust in terms of religious practice. But I think that there's an element now that's growing in terms of feeling this sense of missing or craving more spirituality and intentionality in our actions and behind that practice. So while you're describing the idea of coming and discovering Rosh Chodesh and how profound it is, I think that many people who may even be familiar with Rosh Chodesh might not know that it has that same eye-opening and awakening ability to make somebody use it as something more in their lives and have it be more meaningful. So yes. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about the content that you use to kind of guide these gatherings, because I know that there's this the idea of taking Jewish ritual, or the idea of bringing together community, which is something that Jews are good at, and reframing that in a concept of wellness, and in particular feminine wellness.
Yeah. Okay. I heard a lot of things in that statement, and I'm like, to interrupt, but not. Well, the first thing I hear your question, and I want to kind of backtrack to the conversation of living a committed religious life and also craving spirituality. Mm-hmm. We could have a whole webinar on the intersection of spirituality and religion, and they, for a long time in the globe and in humans and in history, they're very linked, and spirituality has been housed in religious spaces. Now they're separating rapidly. So many people will say they're spiritual but not religious. For this specific webinar and this group of people, we're talking about religious people craving also spirituality. And I just want to unshame that to begin with and say that that's a totally valid feeling and incredible thing to start working towards. And for sure, rabbis have been talking about this exact question for ever in time, about how to revamp our spirituality within containers and laws and rituals that we're all practicing. And so we help that across the board, depending on where someone fits within their religious practice, around bringing this intentionality to what we're doing with our lives, feeling connected to something bigger than ourselves in those moments, in those like micro practices or those small prayers that you say throughout the day, and connecting more inwardly with ourselves at the same time. So it's an expansion out and in. And we just really root ourselves in this concept of spirituality versus religion, although the spirituality and the lineage that we're teaching comes from Judaism, which also is a religion and a culture and a race and many, many things. So I would say that we're definitely a resource to start questioning how to bring more spirituality into our lives. And there's a movement happening with within the Jewish world to really talk about that more. And that's not something that we really inherited as American Jews in the long history of the Jewish people. I talk a lot about how our spiritual hubs have been clear cut on the planet 2 times over in the past 500 years with the Inquisition and then, the Holocaust, and those books are burned, those lineages never really got passed down. And so what we've inherited as American Jews in this 4,000-year-old tradition, we really need to understand within a historical context. And now there's a resurgence of really thinking about how spirituality plays within those laws. So we're here to help within that, and lots to learn. I heard the question that you asked about resources that we have to support people. At the Well really, really, truly started from just a newsletter that happened a week before each Rosh Chodesh. That was my commitment to the universe. Was I just at some point got so fed up with the lack of resources available to support Rosh Chodesh. There's 4 awesome books ever written in English, largely by some of those said women that breathed new life into this ritual. I have a couple, some of them like Miriam's Well by Penina Edelman is here, amazing resource. We have Celebrating the New Moon, Rosh Chodesh Anthology by Susan Barron, who's a friend of mine here in California. But you can tell this isn't necessarily going to be, I love them. And also they're not going to be the kind of books that sit on my friends' coffee tables because they were written in the 80s. And so I just fell in love with this ritual. I immediately realized I was feeling better. It was an incredible way for me to bring together my peers in sort of my space in the Jewish world and to feel really connected to each other, to Jewish time and being with each other and storytelling and bringing oral Torah back in a really powerful way. And immediately I was there are mental health implications of this ritual. As I think a lot about neuroscience and intersecting science and spirituality. And so it started as a resource. We just sent out a newsletter. We call them Moon Manuals. They're online for free. I wrote them based on books that were from before me and also crowdsourced information from people around the world. And At the Well started as just updating resources on Rosh Chodesh, and they all live online. Now we have an Instagram that we teach Torah of our bodies and Judaism 6 days a week, so follow us on Instagram. We have a newsletter. We are always receiving submissions from the global network, so this is another shout out to the JOFA community worldwide to come participate in writing Torah with us and writing it down. And we also, I'm really proud of this book, which is probably a whole nother webinar. It's called Wrestling with Menstruation, and it's about learning how to track your menstrual cycle for mental health and understanding your body from a real health perspective. And then inspired by pages of Talmud, we have the laws of Nida, and we have these 4 menstruators commentating on these laws. And this is a radical book because I think it's one of the first times that female cycling people are really discussing the laws of Taharat Mishpacha, which is a total fascination of mine and love of mine. And I think At the Well is really taking that ritual and shaking it up and saying, this is tracking our menstrual cycles in partnership couldn't be a more unique Jewish practice and something that is definitely a wellness practice.
Can you definitely share some more about that? Because I think that the flip side is true for a lot of people. A lot of people really feel the burden of Taharat HaMishpacha and how burdensome the tracking is. Can you share a little bit of your love? And I would love to also, there's been a request to have the list of books shared after the webinar.
Yes.
So hopefully you can share your reading list.
Totally. And also, Gila, I see that you sent that. We have online, we have resources to create well circles. They're well circle guides. You can find them on our website under circles. And there's 7 packets that I wrote with 30 women the past 2 years to help people make these Rosh Chodesh circles, and wrote it down, and they're step by step. And the entire 7th packet is just resources that we have available that we use. So that's definitely a place to check out. And we will also send some. What was your first question?
The glory and gloriousness that you find in tracking your menstrual cycle.
Yeah, okay. Well, first I want to just name that, I was raised in the conservative movement, and pretty much that spectrum of Jewish people all the way to Reform and secular had never heard of Taharat Mishpacha or the laws of Nida almost ever in all of my Hebrew school years, maybe a little bit. And and my Orthodox friends and kind of can more further towards more traditional practice, it's a hook. You're doing it for blind spirituality. It's one of the most important things you're doing as a relationship in your marriage. And I don't think that there's another ritual that is so clearly divided behind the Jewish people, which are very spectrum. Like there's lots of interpretations of how you keep Shabbat or keep kosher or build a sukkah or da 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 da. And with Nida, which is a really important ritual, it's really not talked about and really not a spectrum practice. You either know about it and you have to do it and you sometimes feel good about it. Sometimes you feel great about it. Sometimes it's a lot of burden and shame, or you've never heard of it before. And so I'm really excited to be someone who's like, no, we need to talk about this. We need to go right into it. So I want to just say that I was raised in more of the setting that I had never heard of before. And my lens is through that. So I cannot speak about it from an Orthodox woman's perspective, although I have talked to dozens and I have a lot of good friends that are Orthodox that I have, talked about this stuff endlessly and want to continue to talk about it. So I have their stories in my mind, but I don't have that from my first person experience. But what I will say is that, like I said before, I learned how to track my menstrual cycle in my Rosh Chodesh circle for the first time in my life. And I know that 13% of my generation can tell you the last day of their menstrual cycle. And I think across the board in the United States and in the world, we might have had more information than our moms or our grandmothers had. We're living post our bodies ourselves lives, but it doesn't mean that information got passed down to us to learn how to track, or that people are on the pill, or and there's a lot to talk about. The fact that I learned that in my reproductive years, if I'm not taking hormones, the chemistry of my brain will change every single day, and I'll never wake up the same that I did the day before, makes me really understand that I am in a cycling body, and that in regards to my health and my mental health specifically, if I know where I am in my cycle, then I have more space to respond to myself with love and compassion and, all of myself, as opposed to reacting to the fact that I don't feel good and then blaming or shaming myself that I can't go to the gym every single day of my life, for example, that I'm not a linear person, I'm a cyclical person, and that there is an empowering thing to do that. So the fact that I learned how to do that with Jewish women was really powerful. I suffered from depression for so much of my life, and no one had ever taught me to track my cycle. So right there, smack in my face, is a wellness practice, is a mental health practice of just tracking. And the fact that it is a Jewish ritual and an important practice to be in awareness of where I am in my cycle and to talk about it with people that I'm involved with romantically just blows my heart right open, because it's giving a lot of permission to be in alignment with my body and to use that alignment as a connection to my Judaism. That I can actually be flexing my Jewish muscles by saying, I am on the 28th day of my cycle. And I know it, and I feel connected to my body, and I'm proud to be in this body, and it can create life. And I have a lot of choice and power and compassion in how I choose to live day 28.
I kind of really love and respect the lens through which you're looking at so much of this ritual and practice that I think in the Orthodox community exists. I think we're starting to engage in these conversations where we're giving ourselves permission to add this overlay of our feminine perspective on what this lived experience is like. And I love that you are a step ahead almost in really embracing it in what it adds to your life. And I think that I know I personally would gain tremendously by, reading that book or hearing that thought on the things that, we're already practicing and already doing and integrated into our lives, but never took the moment to pause and reframe it in a way that is healing and helpful. You and I have spoken a little bit about that science and wellness elements that are beneficial to the actions that we're already doing, the practices that we already have. This idea of knowing your cycle and taking advantage of the fact that you are so aware of your cycle in the process of Nida, and understanding what that does to you mentally and where you are mentally, and using that to your advantage. We spoke about that briefly, like you gave a great example about Modani. So that idea of reframing Jewish ritual as a wellness practice from the science perspective, you're great at that. Can you give a few more of those concrete examples? I know that your moon manuals, yes, are full of great pieces of that kind of give that like intentionality that is very feminine and very healing to things that we're already doing.
Yeah. Again, so many things I want to just One thing I want to say though, your fertility is not part of your health. It is your health, whether or not you're choosing to have a baby or not. And the fact that we are aware of it, and Jewish women have always been aware of it, and our matriarchs are birth workers, and talking about fertility means that it's part of what I think I inherited as a Jewish woman, to be in relationship to my body and to understand women's health across the board. That is something that I feel connected to through all my ancestors. And then it's very kind to say I'm a step ahead, but I want to just shout out that I'm not. I'm really right here with everyone. And I really, really think that, and that the type of leadership that I try to have and the type of network that At the Well is trying to build is that we're doing this literally together in our small pockets over the world, and that we're trying to figure this out together. And At the Well will be the strongest if we're more diverse. And so being invited to places like JOFA to come talk about the work is extremely exciting to me, because my normal Jewish life, I'm not necessarily in those spaces. But the more JOFA well circles that can pop up in the world, the stronger all of us will be, for sure. And it doesn't mean that we are all practicing our Judaism the same way, or all of us interpret what it means to be a woman the same way. And that's great and fine. And that is just for us to evolve together. So I want to just shout out that it's I'm right here with you, and I want more Sarahs and Rachels and Rebeccas and all of our sisters out there to be part of it. In terms of thinking about rituals as wellness practices, so like rituals are objects or moments or calendar dates that you do repeatedly, and those things help you feel expansive in mundane moments and elevate them to holy moments. We have a lot of them in Judaism. Amazing. They can also completely be reframed as mindfulness practices, which is a secular term that we use to teach about presence and awareness, that has origins in other ancient traditions like Theravada Buddhism, which I've been really impacted by. And also like all of these 100 prayers every day and all these rituals and all these holidays are just moments for us to be like, no, this moment in time right now, I'm supposed to feel this, and I'm going to give myself permission to literally have the saddest day of the year and to cry and to have that container. So it's not happening all the time. It's just happening in those moments. And if you can bring the awareness practice to the ritual, then we're talking about real spiritual connection. Wellness is a really broad term. It's connected to feeling good and feeling healthy in our lives. I think that when I think about At the Well and Jewish wellness, I use the word shleimut or wholeness a lot. And so, we are envisioning a world where women feel whole based on their connections to each other and to Jewish practice. That's what we envision. We're working towards wholeness and measurements of wholeness. And through that, we're one of the things we do is to help these circles happen. And we think that they're great places to feel that, and to explore that. So wellness, really broad term, but all these Jewish practices are opportunities to feel into that wholeness. And because my life and my spiritual life and my religious life is towards the secular side, and also the invitation in Judaism to be part of understanding what this original book means and join the book club and do my reading and know where we are in the Torah, and also interpret what it means to me as Sarah Michal Waxman in 5778, and that is my responsibility and my inheritance. I think of things in a little bit of like a broader terms in terms of how I think about rituals. Specifically, you're saying like modernity. Like from a neuroscience perspective, one of the best things you can do for your brain or for someone who's struggling from some mental health to rewire sort of neural pathways in your brain is to wake up and have gratitude. And I learned that when I was really suffering in my mid-20s, and I ended up, sorry, it's buzzing. I ended up like becoming gratitude buddies with my mom, and we would just like text each other and first thing in the morning, things that we're grateful for. And first of all, doing with your mom, beautiful and also deep and it can be intense, but it's a texting thing. So it's a really cool practice that we had for a little bit. And also, it really forced me to think of things that I was grateful for. And there were some days that I was like, I'm not grateful for anything, like everything stinks. And then I was like, no, I'm breathing, I'm alive, I have abundance, da 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 da. And it just helped me do that. Again, the fact that the first prayer that we say when we flicker our eyes open as we're coming into this day is a gratitude prayer just reinforces this like beautiful tradition that I feel so grateful to be part of. And nodding to rabbis thousands of years before me, even dudes who were like, this is an important thing for our wellness and our humanness, and we're going to put a structure around it. And because the framework of all of the things that we see is from a religious God experience, we're going to frame it that way. But the neuroscientists of today can be like, yes, the Moda Ani, do the Moda Ani, because it's going to help reframe your brain. And in a day and age when we do a lot of things because it's proven in science to be good for us, like go to the gym, stop smoking, meditate, eat vegetables. Like we all were like, I want the stats on it. The kind of the stats on the prayers and the rituals and the traditions are coming out more and more when we're linking neuroscience to the conversation, which is a passion of mine. And At the Well exists to help make those practices, health and holiness, come together more.
I think that's beautiful. I want to make sure that you have a chance to, there's so much to talk about. I mean, anybody who's listening and paying attention, the biblical babes that you focus on, I love. I think that they don't get enough spotlight time. And it's just this like reminder of where we come from and who we are and the strength that is part of our history and tradition that doesn't always get highlighted. I want
biblical babes. It's like part of our Instagram campaign.
Awesome.
These are not new. We take stories of biblical women and we're telling their stories. And the inspiration behind that was, again, like I could tell you who Athena was and who Kali is and who Guinevere is, but I actually really didn't know the stories of the people that I'm named for. I'm Sarah Michal, double biblical babe. And when I looked around at a lot of my friends who were like Rachel's and, you know, Leia's and Deborah's and all of these characters that we are named for, and I have been probably named, I'm named for two of my great grandmothers named Sarah, like, and they're named for their great grandmothers. It's like, I'm part of something that can probably date back all the way to like the OG Sarah. And I don't totally know her. And I'm not talking about how she's relevant in my life, although she's obviously so relevant in my life because I'm called for her.
Right.
So we want, At the Well is one of the things that we do is every week we put out a biblical babe, and some days there are modern biblical babes and there are people within our network that are doing cool things or helping build this, like they submitted an article or something, running an event in their community. Or every other week we throw back to Torah text and we're reading what we do know of these women and sort of imagining their sisters in your well circle and what they might be, what their lesson of their lives might be for us.
That's awesome. I love that imagery.
Sarah Klegman, who's very similar name to me and also an amazing person who runs At the Well's content, is the one who came up with the term biblical babe. So shout out to Sarah Klegman, who's actually in the mood right now teaching in South Africa.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so can you talk to us about Rosh Chodesh Elul? What would it look like to walk into your well circle this month, and what would you have us, what light switch would you have us switch on for this month that we're about to walk into?
Yeah, so let me just back up a little bit and say what well circles kind of look like. They're inspired by the ritual of Rosh Chodesh, which is the first commandment in Exodus, is to mark the moon and all the moons thereafter. The difference between being a slave and a free person is your ownership of time, and Jews mark time by the moon. In the medieval times, it became elevated as a women's holiday, and in the 60s and 70s, it was breathed new life into forming women's circles on this day. Although I will say that Rosh Chodesh although it's an important marking of time, and again, first commandment in Exodus, really can't miss it, it's one of the most lawless rituals in all of Judaism, which we don't have a structure of how to mark that time and how to sanctify that time. And what At the Well is doing is saying, sanctify the time with these well circles. And what we help people do is to have a group of people who commit to meeting each other every month, and they have a rotating leadership model. So every month someone hosts in their home, another person facilitates, always 2 people in Chavruta doing the evening together, and the rest of the people just show up. So if the 13 people or so that we're live on this webinar right now, we're our well circle, you'd be the host, I'd be the facilitator, and everybody else just gets to like show up that night. But next month, one of the other people that's listening is going to host in their home and facilitate. And that's an important thing to teach, rotating leadership models, very feminine in style. We can even look towards some of the Torah babes out there to think about how they got things done. They did it in community with each other. And also when we're talking about sense of belonging and real definitions of what communities can do to lengthen your DNA strands and the neuroscience behind some of the important stuff that we think we're teaching, that rotating leadership model is really important. So I want to pause there. So let's say it is Rosh Chodesh and you're our host and I'm the facilitator. Actually, I'm hosting in my home this month for my friends. So I'm going to make some dinner and I'm going to clean the space and get a bunch of candles and talk to the person who's facilitating and ask her what she needs from the space for us to support. We really love to inspire the facilitators to find her own heart, passion, neshama, voice about how she wants to portray the themes of that Hebrew calendar month. So we have, hundreds of circles all over the world. That means there's hundreds of facilitators that are going to teach Elul. Some of them might dance. Some of them might do some art. Some of them might do some meditation. Some of them might do a writing exercise. You can see there's lots of different modalities. And again, we have them in our resources that we have online under modalities section. But what we're trying to teach people to do is use the essence, the themes, the energies of the month to come alive and to make meaning in our lives. So the month of Elul couldn't be a more perfect and robust month to do that, because it's the real true beginning of preparing ourselves to do the new year. And the time of Elul all the way to the end of Simchat Torah is like a time. And in Tishrei, which is the next month, we have 21 of 29 days are elevated holy moments to connect with your divinity and with your spirituality. And the month of Elul is like an entire month to help you prepare to do that hard work. And so there's practices of saying prayers in the morning, to blow the shofar, to crack your soul open every single day. We have our New Year's really associated not so much with like party and drinking and balls dropping, but on forgiveness and shedding and tshuva and really owning our humanness and understanding where we missed the mark, and then doing something that's a radically hard thing for humans to do, which is forgiving ourselves and others. That is not a small thing. That is a very, very hard thing if taken really literally. So Elul is here to help us do that. So, the month of Elul, we might talk about what it might mean to reflect on ourselves in this type of way, not to feel bad about ourselves, but to have spaciousness around what it is that we actually did do. And can we make lists of things? Can we make the list of the people we want to talk to this month? Can we commit to a daily practice that we might have of journaling? Because I'm a dance machine, I always like my turn to facilitate. There's a lot of movement involved, and we might talk about forgiveness or this concept of Shuva and make a playlist together and do some movement as a group and then sit down and process that together. So there's lots of different ideas, and the moon manuals, again, were like a total commitment that I had to the universe to update these resources to something that sounded a little bit more like what I was comfortable using and reading for my own spiritual life. And in those guides, we have lots of different inspirations. We hope jog people's minds to think about how they might want to help bring Elul forward. So I don't want to say this is exactly how you do it, because again, this is the lawless ritual, which means that we can interpret and create a lot of new things here. And if we write it down at the same time, then we're helping move forward oral Torah and written Torah, specifically around Rosh Chodesh. But I will say that the month of Elul is like a really sweet and special time of year. And so I strongly encourage, I know I'm talking, this is kind of the quiet, these are people who already know that it's Elul, but I encourage you to think about this month, how I might bring more spirituality to my Elul prep. Not just like saying the prayer, but like, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes to like think about that conversation that I had with my sister-in-law 2 months ago, and what I said and what I did. Exactly this, which is like shame or sadness or hurt. And it's like Judaism in this time of year is asking you to just say that that's what happened, to have space around that we know that we're going to miss the mark, and then to talk about it so that it's no longer this. It's like growth with your sister-in-law, for example.
I want to show up to your little circle.
Just so you know, again, I'm right there with everybody in terms of stuff and close people in my lives and families. I'm just another human being suffering from the same types of disconnections that we do to each other. And the world will be sweeter if we're all doing this type of work together to scale. It just becomes easier to have these types of conversations in our lives and to unshame our lives, which is like a big, big thing about why we exist.
What you're saying resonates profoundly, and I love the way that you've structured your moon manuals and all the resources that you have. They are extremely accessible and personal. You can personalize them to fit your community. I'm using your terminology.
Totally. And like that's I always want to say something about it, because like I know I'm doing a webinar right now, but I don't love being necessarily like, I don't want my stuff everywhere. Like I'm kind of a shy person actually. But I did write a personal journal reflection to each moon manual, because I know that if I'm putting this out there, I need to go first and to role model what it means to be vulnerable and to open up. And I find that those are some of the things I hear back the most from people, being like, I loved what you wrote this month. It helped me X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
Meditations and the recipes and the art projects, they're all there to help the facilitator. But when it comes to really like hearing how this might be for me, the storytelling in any culture across the world is the way that we make, you pull at the heartstrings of people. So the personal stuff is really, really, really important to share.
I think with some of the resources, the few that I've seen on your website and in my inbox, I love the way that you can tap into them. Like I feel like in my own personal experience, I've been a part of, throughout my own, journey, a part of a number of different Rosh Chodesh groups or female gatherings. And the idea that you have this resource that changes and is seasonally appropriate and comes from many different sources, which I really love, because a lot of this stuff is very personal, both, as an individual and as a community, something that feels comfortable, especially when you're encouraging such personal honesty and sharing. Creating that safe space is really critical. And you give such a lovely variety of options that I love the idea almost of, if anybody listening or thinking about it has an existent Rosh Chodesh group, where you come together and you're learning some particular text or you're discussing some particular topics. Many of the resources that At the Well offers, you can pick even just one that can change the dynamic of that collective of people and enhance and elevate the experience of coming together and make it feel new each month and make it feel really resonant each month. And particularly feminine and intentional, which I truly, truly love about what you offer. I wanted to ask you also, because I know this is another passion of yours that you speak so much about. I would love to hear you talk about your own, your thoughts on mikvah. I'll leave it at that, because you have your own journey, and I think that it's something that the people grapple with a bit and think about a lot, and you have your own unique thoughts about it, and I think we'd all benefit from hearing your story.
Okay. Well, first of all, I wrote this article in Well and Good, so it's on our website, about a story that happened to me with mikvah. Again, Mikvah, like any ritual, is a technology to help moments happen and be holy. It's a spiritual technology. This spiritual technology literally is in place to help people transform, to move from one place to the next place. If you're not Jewish, you go to the mikvah, you become Jewish. Your plates are not kosher, they go to the mikvah, they become kosher. So it goes from here, ritual, here. My mikvah journey is a very universe beshert thing. I jumped the gun. I basically used the mikvah to help me heal from 15 years of eating disorders, to connect with my body. And it happened in a very bizarre way, which is I got a phone call from Naomi Malka, who's the mikvah lady at the Adas Israel Synagogue in Washington, D.C., of which I'm a lifetime member of, and had at the time when I got this phone call from her, again, in that 4-month time that I said that I was like over here suffering from depression and loneliness and disconnection of my body. And then these 4 Jewish rituals just like came into my life and moved me over here. Mikvah is one of them. So I got a call from Naomi to basically be a mikvah model for my synagogue in a new program that they were using to help teenage girls and around their bat mitzvahs and their moms use the mikvah to heal from eating disorders and body image issues. And I had never seen the mikvah before. I had definitely learned very little about it. I knew it was something you did before you got married. And the Adas mikvah was a real like halacha observant mikvah for Orthodox conversions. And the conservative synagogue was part of the Mayin Chaim sort of rising tides, Anita Diamond inspired movement to use the ritual for more expansive transformations. Not like they're actually more important, just like a different, you can use it to survive after you've survived from cancer or you graduated from high school or any sort of transformation. And my synagogue decided they wanted to do this program. And for some reason, my name got into, like, I wasn't involved. I wasn't doing anything in the Jewish world. Like, it really was bizarre. I got this random call from the mikvah lady asking me if I would be the person that would show the ritual to these teenage girls. And it was only 6 months after I had bought a bathing suit for the first time in 15 years. And so there's a longer story, but like I was really trying to save my life and heal myself and to move from massive amounts of shame and things that I had thought that I had deserved in my life. And yeah, I got this call randomly to become part of this mikvah. And I said, absolutely not, just like many great Jewish leaders who are like, no way, this is not for me. And then she was pretty persistent and kept calling me back and was like, for some reason, everyone thinks you're the right person to do this. And so I said yes. And then for 1.5 years, I became the Adas Israel mikvah model and performed the ritual for teenagers. I was wearing a bathing suit, so you can see it's non-traditional halacha. And yeah, in that 1.5 years was the time that I was like, oh my goodness, this ritual of mikvah is a wellness practice, perhaps is like saving the connection that I have to my body and my life, and has a lot of potential to help others who want to transform. And I became obsessed with it. And again, the mikvah was like the first time that I was like, oh, Judaism as a wellness strategy, as a way to feel whole. And it's not anything new. It's just a reframing of what it is that we're doing and inviting in the spirituality and inviting in the health. And here I am suffering from mental health stuff, body dysphoria, and there's an ancient Jewish practice that's here to save my life. So I think that that's a unique use of the mikvah for most of the JOFA listeners, but certainly the conversation of Nida and mikvah are traditionally not talked about, or things that happen at night. And for all the people who feel so connected to them and love them and it enhances their life, there's a woman that's out there that's feeling burdened and shamed by it and really, really struggling. And so if I can do anything to just crack open the conversation of what is being, how our bodies are being used, what we're doing with them, what we're using these rituals for, and can we create more of a society to talk about the stuff that is hurting and holding us back, then that's a positive thing. So no doubt, I'm assuming there's some pushback around the laws of the mikvah and how you use it, and that's totally fine because we have a diverse network of people and we're not going to agree, but we have the same value set that this is amplifying my life and making me feel more whole and more connected to my divinity and my connection to this oneness of the world.
I think the way that you describe the experience of using the mikvah ritual itself as a tool of transformation, I think that that's something that we often forget, because the act of actually getting into the water is so connected and tied up in this tight little bundle with the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, which are often kind of more the source of shame or burden, rather than the actual ritual and that, machine that mikvah can be. And I think it's actually really beautiful, the way that you were able to share, and total credit to Naomi at Addis for sharing the magic is the wrong word, but the power of this ritual in being that source of transformation, which was its original biblical intention. You used it to go from one status to another, and literally walk from one place in your life to another place that granted you different permissions to function differently in society.
Yeah.
And I love that you gave that in an empowering and really physical, bodily way to teenagers. I'm assuming teenage girls.
Yeah.
Which I so love, because I think, like, personally as a mom, the idea that our tradition actually has a space that can have a girl feel celebrated for her body, is something that we need more of. And I think that that's truly beautiful that you were able to encapsulate that. And even though I agree with you that there is so much in terms of, the way Orthodoxy views mikvah versus more open-minded perspectives on mikvah, I think that there's room for both, because if you're showing up there anyway, there is possibly a point in life where that water will be more than just that monthly ritual that you do out of, just because it's part of what you do in your habit, and recycle. But you might actually find yourself there confronting something else in addition. And the idea of having these young women introduced to mikvah in a way that feels empowering and understand that that water is a tool, I think that's incredible, and hopefully something that will stick with them throughout their life's journey.
Sure. The water can hold it all. Like, there's nothing that the water can't hold, and it's there for us. And it's not even about open-minded interpretations. It's just different interpretations for different people in different lives that want to bring Judaism into their life to make meaning. And for some people it looks like this, and for some people it looks like this, but the act and the ritual and the structure of it itself is intact for thousands of years. So that's just something that humans need. I love it. I talk about it all the time. Now my focus with mikvah is really helping more of the secular wellness world think about the way that we use water, and think about the way that we are in relation to the water that comes from the sky and goes out, and then our bodies are impermanent, and all of these things that are right there in the intention behind the ritual, which, again, for Judaism, we have a lot of laws and a lot of rituals and a lot of holidays that are all put there on purpose to help us not forget how connected we are to this divine life, to this oneness, and to remind us throughout our mundane moments that we're actually something bigger and part of something more whole. And how we use that reminder in our lives is going to look different, again, for the spectrum of Jewish people.
That's beautiful. Does At the Well have a resource connected in particular? I know you have your book on menstruation. Do you have anything in particular on mikvah available on your website?
Not yet. There's an article that I wrote just last week for Well and Good that kind of shares my body image issue healing story with mikvah. We definitely plan on doing stuff in the future. In the meantime, there's Mayim Chaim, there's the Addis Israel Mikvah, there's Immerse NYC, there's the Eden Center in Jerusalem, and there's a lot of things that are kind of happening right now around that. I really am excited for At the Well as a women's wellness organization to help push forward mikvah as a ritual and a tool for us to use to connect with ourselves and with divinity and with our Judaism. But that's not necessarily the only thing that we do. Our corner of this really thing that we do is really, really, really pushing forward Rosh Chodesh as a marking of time for everybody, as a women's holiday and a time to come together in this particular way of forming community, and to really encourage the tracking of Jewish time. You can see I'm obsessed with calendars. This is my office. I have 100 calendars back here. These are just some of them. And actually at the well, I can show you, we just made our own 5779 calendars. They're going to be a little bit bigger, but you can see we worked with a calligrapher. So tracking Jewish time as a spiritual practice, meaning what's happening with me in Tevet, what's happening with me in Sivan, what's happening with me in Elul, what's happening with me in Cheshvan, and using those to help talk about more of the inner world conversation that as humans, we need to be coaxed and reminded to everything's not what's happening on Instagram. It's way more complex than that. And the Hebrew calendar is an invitation for us to use that. So between the reframing Nida, really promoting mikvah, and then tracking Jewish time spiritually and forming Rosh Chodesh circles. Those are the 4 things that At the Well works on when we're talking about Jewish wellness rituals. And of course, like the way that we talked about Moda Ani, or using Passover, perhaps the most oldest spring cleaning cleanse ever in the world. We have other ways of looking at Jewish rituals, but those 4 are like kind of the main ones that we really think about promoting.
So just in case anybody is interested in either finding a well circle to join or starting one themselves, what should we do?
Okay, so we're a tiny organization. You're looking at the only full-time employee, and soon we're going to be growing. So we're not able to match people through us to circles right now, but we are really, really, really capable of helping and coaching new circles to form. So in the JOFA network, there's no doubt in my mind that every single person that's listening that might be like, wait a second, I want one of those spaces. This sounds awesome. This sounds really powerful. This sounds like the space that I can talk about my life. We are here to support you. So you can email us. You can download our resources on Well Circle Guides. That's a great place to start because we first give the packet on values out for free, and then the others are $36, so affordable, and they lead you through all the steps that you think that you need to go from wanting this to having a thriving one. And then you can email me and we can get on the phone. And we also have people who want to help support you in their own, part of their own giving back to this network is to teach forward. So we're here for you on that. And also, I think the JOFA people who help community form, and that's their job, are also interested in seeing how they can support the JOFA crew of people to make these well circles happen. And no doubt across the board, if you do start making a Rosh Chodesh circle, or you're starting to use our resources or anything, just email me and let me know so that as we grow, we can start seeing where these like pockets of light and pockets of these communities are happening. And like I said, the network of At the Well has potential to change a lot in society and culture, to push forward social change, a lot about this Jewish spirituality, a lot about women's spirituality within the Jewish world. And we will only be able to do that if we're diverse. And so I really want to know where there are things that are happening.
Do you have plans to bring together that network you're talking about, or address the network collectively to make movements in any way? I know that that's kind of like the long vision.
Well, we have events and retreats that we co-sponsor things with people, and then we also run our own, and we love doing that because the well circles are diverse. And then when we run an event, we get all of these people from all these different parts of the Jewish community who probably would never come together with each other because they disagree on Israel, or they disagree on the laws, or they disagree on kosher, and we try to create the space where everyone can literally meet us at the well at a meeting spot. And because we're talking about health and spirituality, and because we're really based on these values rather than on telling you what you need to do, we see this diversity come in, and that makes our heart sing. So we have events about 2 a month around the US, and you can find them on our website. They're a lot of California based, but we will be doing more in New York and in Israel next year. And then we had an 80-person summit in December called Timbrel, which is our biblical tambourine from our radical biblical babe, ecstatic dancer, community organizer, Miriam. We're having another Timbrel before Passover March in California in Sonoma next year. So it's a health and spirituality summit. So we'll have that convening. So we have events, we have retreats, We help start circles. We have a ton of content and a product line like candles and scarves in our calendar. And there's lots of ways to get involved. And shout out to Make Circles. Shout out to help us write content. Shout out to being part of this really global network that's linking our health and our holiness together.
I love it. Sarah, thank you. Thank you. That's all the time we have for today. If you were intrigued and inspired, check out www.atthewellproject.com for all those amazing resources that we didn't even begin to touch on, and more information about how to start your own well circle. Sarah, thank you for your vision and your commitment to holy wholeness. And thank you for doing your part in impacting the Jewish lives of women for the better. We're grateful to you.
Likewise. JOFA isn't like, wow, I'm in awe of this organization and of the people who make the engine turn. So we're right there with you for a different flavor of the same thing, I think. And
amen.
Really